Hello, welcome to another installment of what I'm calling the Goddess Keys monologues. Okay, this is my way of expressing myself creatively as I go through this process of, for lack of a better term, soul retrieval and recapitulation, learning more about the original records of the earth and beyond, and moving through these frequencies, healing certain scripts that are running and playing, and doing so from a state of creation, from a state of play. So, this is a monologue, y'all. Okay, so this is an artistic piece that I'm co creating with whoever enters this live. That being said, I will respond to questions and comments as they're applicable. Okay, so it's not like a full monologue, but I'll do a bit of where I like go and do my thing, and then I'll connect with y'all too. Okay, Divine Rising, Primordial Titan of Tiamat. I love that. I love that. Okay, so how did this I am Yakub conversation come up? Well, I have been on a roll with doing these lives. I've been really being pushed to heal collectively or to share this experience collectively because it's helping me in a lot of ways, and it will help y'all whenever you receive this. This is a timeless message. All right. So, or a timeless monologue. Okay. So, how did this come about? Well, I was rewatching my live on Yakub yesterday, and that might sound weird to be like, okay, you watch your own live? Well, a lot of frequencies come up in these lives. These are like transmissions, right? So I'm in the moment sometimes, and I'm not able to catch everything that's going on. But if I rewatch it, then I can kind of get my own message. Sometimes I also need a certain message through these conversations, right? So as I'm watching the replay, and I'm looking at my head, and I'm like, I got a big shiny head, and I love my big head, okay? And they always say that big heads, they tend to be what? A mark of intelligence, So I'm like talking about Yakub, and I'm looking at my big shiny forehead. I'm like, I am Yakub. I was like, uh-oh, here goes the polarity integration. And I've been moving up to this frequency for a while, okay? It's gone in stages. I've been moving through this inner earth story. I've had to go through a lot of trauma, or clearing a lot of trauma scripts related to inner earth. Like, there was a part of me that was so afraid of subterranean realms. At first, I thought it was the hell program. I thought there was like, oh, I'm afraid of the underworld, right? I'm afraid of hell, because they put that whole hell script onto us to also get us afraid to navigate down under and always wanting to climb up. So at first I thought it was that. I'm like, oh, I must be afraid of hell. Okay. That's why I'm afraid of like these subterranean realms. But every time I knew that the inner earth frequency was important to tap in with. But every time I would, think about going subterranean or exploring, I would just get like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, but there was a weird trauma script, and I had to go through it in stages, and this is what's going to happen sometimes. Like, sometimes we wake up, right? And we want to like heal everything at once, and we just want to be a finished healed product, but that's not the way this goes. Sometimes you have to move through it. You have to create through it. Sometimes you're reflecting. Sometimes you just kind of need to process through things, okay? And your consciousness will accept certain things when you are ready. Okay, so I have been working through a fear of the below, the depths, a fear of inner earth, and moving through those frequencies. So we're going to discuss that today. And yesterday, I channeled the frequencies of Tiamat. And this is a continuation of that. So if this is a topic that is of interest to you, then it might be good. Oh, hello, Ricardo. Okay, Argentina. Yep. I love it. Okay, so first of all, I just want to welcome folks who are coming in. If you're vibing with the flow of things, feel free to share a like to contribute to this collective resonance field that we're doing, okay? Let me know if you have questions or comments as they come up, and I will respond, okay? So I am going to shift gears for a second, right? We're going to get into Yakub. I'm going to tell you a story related to Yakub, themes of Yakub, okay? Y'all may have read this book. This I actually created a soundtrack for. It's called Mind of My Mind by the book. It's from the book Mind of My Mind by Octavia Butler. Shouts out to Octavia Butler. I definitely see her as like a Sybil. She has that Sybil frequency. So that would be the frequencies of like, at the very least, going back to like Göbekli Tepe, Turkey area, okay? And Octavia Butler, she was known as being a science fiction writer. She was a melanated science fiction writer. She did the unthinkable in her time. She got published in science fiction as a melanated woman in a field that was completely like, she was an anomaly, okay? So, and I've always just really, really respected her work. I've learned a lot through her work and through her process. And I always loved how Octavia Butler danced the lines of quote unquote truth and fiction. She was an oracle. And so she put a lot of codes for us to navigate. She did that. The first book I read from her was called Parable of the Talents. And this is, that's a whole other frequency, which is a great book to read. And a lot of that, there's like prophecy in it too. But then she also created the book Mind of My Mind, which I've always really, really loved this book, Mind of My Mind. And I realize now that it was because it was transmitting a lot of these codes around Yakub. And she was also transmitting different frameworks for working with these energies related to genetic engineering, okay, and systems of enslavement. So let me just brief you, relax, I got my tea here. I'm not really able to eat like that today for some reason, yeah, so I'm just clear channel, I'm just drinking some tea and I have a little bit of water. Okay, so in Mind of My Mind, it is around this, it's centered around, it's actually like not a trilogy, but there's a continuation series related to this genetic engineer by the name of Doro. Doro was a parasitic sort of spirit. He was raised in Nubia, okay? So around East Africa sort of region, okay? Around that Horn of Africa. So Doro came into his powers. Let's say he came into his elemental powers very suddenly. And out of nowhere, he became a parasitic spirit. And he could not control his powers when this occurred. This was thousands upon thousands of years ago in the time of Nubia. Doro, when he came into his powers, he became this parasitic spirit and he absorbed his whole village and killed his parents too, because he couldn't control his powers, okay? And he caused a lot of destruction for a really long time. He went around different parts of Africa. He didn't know, he couldn't control his powers. So he was just causing a ruckus. And the way his powers works is that he wasn't embodied anymore. He needed to move his spirit through other human vessels. And when he did that, he took life. So if you can imagine somebody who's around 11 years old when these powers came about. If you can imagine somebody who all of a sudden becomes a parasitic spirit at 11 years old, can't control their powers, and starts just whirling around, taking people down with him, okay? Later on, Doro learned how to navigate his powers, and he became very powerful, very feared. And Doro had a dream. Doro had a dream. Doro's dream was to create a master race. Really, what it was is that Doro felt very lonely. Doro was an eternal being now, right? And he was this like parasitic spirit. He needed company. So that was his way in his own consciousness of saying, I need family. So Doro started this very aggressive genetic engineering program and started breeding people. And yeah, he treated a whole bunch of people like cattle. He would pair people together who were also elemental beings. Some of their powers were latent, other powers were active. Okay, this is all from the story of Mind of My Mind by Octavia Butler. Okay, we're gonna bridge Yakub into this. So Doro was he was on a campaign. He was on an aggressive genetic engineering campaign. And he hurt a lot of people along the way. He bred people. He didn't see himself as equal to human beings because he was an eternal being, parasitic spirit. So he was trying to create this master race, and he needed a key to do it. He needed to have a successful genetic experiment. During his time of forced breeding, creating this master race, lots of people died. A lot of people went insane. He created families that couldn't stand being around each other too. He created families that basically because they had these latent sort of magical abilities that weren't being expressed, they were, prone to things like alcoholism, sex addiction, like a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. So he created very fractured, traumatized bloodlines along the way. That's the story of Doro until finally one day he was able to bring his dream to fruition. He was trying to create a certain type of telepath, okay, that could kind of control the hive. And it ended up being one of his granddaughters, okay? And he was excited at first. He was like, finally, this experiment worked. When she transitioned into her powers, what happened is she actually became a hive telepath. And she was able to basically bring everybody, all of his creations, from a certain lineage, not all of his creations all throughout, but from a certain bloodline. She was able to bring all of them into a hive. And she became the queen telepath, basically. And this was against people's will as well. The people that she brought into her hive were very, very powerful. Okay, and they were used to being like the boss or the apex predator. And now all of a sudden, and she was young too, she was around 19. Her name was Mary. That's important for this conversation. So Mary, this 19-year-old who just comes into her abilities, now all of a sudden, she is the queen of the hive of all of these powerful telepaths. And people are pissed at first. They kind of want to kill her, like they want to be rid of her. But they actually start liking the situation because a lot of them were really imbalanced before. And something about being a part of this hive caused them to like mellow out and balance out. And they were able to live a little bit more harmoniously. And Mary, though, was parasitic. So she came from Doro's lineage. So when we think of parasitism, it's usually a negative, right? And what that means, though, is she wasn't a parasite like Doro. So Doro was a parasite where he literally he could not be embodied on his own. So he had to take someone's life in order to wear a body. So he literally would wear human bodies like clothes. Okay. And so that's, if you do that for a few thousand years, you're not thinking much about humanity, right? And it was weird because the hive, all of these people that Doro bred, they had a really weird relationship with Doro because Doro was their god. He was their creator. So they had this like admiration of Doro, right? They had this love of Doro. There was a huge ownership sort of frequency with that. But then they also hated him because it was like he treated them like cattle, and that was the way it is. And if they wouldn't comply with something he wanted, then he would kill him, basically. Okay. So that was the dynamic that they were in. They were kind of in this sleep state. They were kind of in this yeah, they were very much kind of stuck in a cycle. They were stuck in a certain karmic loop with this karmic breeding loop. And here Mary comes along, and now she's the hive telepath. And the way she was parasitic wasn't the same way Doro was parasitic. When Doro fed off of people, he took their whole life. Mary would slowly kind of feed upon the life force of the hive, but not to a point. She was able to control her powers. Okay. There were other telepaths that were like super energy harvesters, but she was kind of able to feed a little bit off of the hive. But here's the thing, she had to grow. She couldn't just, oh, I have 100 people in my hive, now I'm stopping. She couldn't. She had to keep, okay, now I want 1,000, now I want 2,000, because that was her ability. It was based upon this parasitism. Okay. So Doro first, he's excited because he's like, yes, now I'm going to be able to build this civilization exactly how I want it. But then he got jealous because he wanted to be the hive telepath. He's like, dang, I put in all this work and now she is the queen of the hive. So he started to feel left out, and then he was like, you know what? I have to lay the law down. You cannot gather any more people. And Mary's like, what are you talking about? It's like telling somebody, oh, I can't eat. Okay. And she's like, well, oh, what are you talking about? Like, I can't grow this, because she was also starting to heal latents as well. The latents that didn't have their powers activated, that were like hooked on drugs, or they were stuck in really harsh karmic cycles, or lots of mental health issues. Her telepathy and her parasitism was somehow able to balance them out. So that was really interesting too, because Doro was just kind of using the latents as like broken experiments, but now they were able to get their lives back in certain ways. But, this hive telepath situation, they also got into the frequencies of, oh, humans are just cattle. Humans are just our beings that we move through. Okay, that was the frequencies that they had too. So they, it's interesting. They couldn't stand children. The people, the Doro's children couldn't stand children. So they needed humans to basically raise their children, because otherwise it wouldn't be a safe place. Okay, so they were like basically remoting different humans to raise their children, to keep this hive going. Okay. And they were able to do this through mind control and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really kind of a weird, kind of story, very dystopian. And, at first Mary tried to listen to what Doro was saying. She tried to comply. She tried to not feed off of anyone anymore. However, she couldn't, literally, she could not. And the hive started realizing, we're going to have to take Doro out, because Doro is messing up our vitality, our ability to live and thrive. Okay. And they were able to do it. Basically Mary absorbed Doro into the hive, and then they consumed Doro, and then there was no more Doro. That was the end of this genetic engineer. So let's break it down, because on one way, this just sounds like a really dystopian tale. Wow. Okay. We have hives, hive mind, parasitism, breeding, slavery, experimentation. Wow. But there's a deeper layer to this. Mary, the name of the person who was able to absorb Doro, this entity that had lived for thousands of years, destroying thousands of lives. I mean, more than you can even count. Okay. This telepath by the name of Mary, similar to like a Mother Mary, a mother type frequency, was able to absorb Doro, was able to vacuum cleaner this very intensely parasitic spirit. Okay. And she was the queen of the hive, so she was able to do that. Octavia Butler knew what she was doing with the names and everything else, even with the location of where Doro was, because Doro was from Nubia, and there are murmurings that at the Horn of Africa, there is another inner earth portal. I talked about how there are also inner earth portals, like more in Central South America, but there's an interesting frequency of there being one also around the Horn of Africa. So very interesting that Doros happens to be from Nubia. And that's something that's very similar to Yakub. Yakub was from Inner Earth, but and there's different narratives, okay? But he ended up coming up to the surface of the earth, and it happened because his mother was one of the original humans on the planet. So his mother was one of the original humans. So he had some human in him, okay? And he also had some higher intelligence sort of inner earth consciousness, okay? So there was a merging there. And, the stories get a little hazy. There was definitely a mother wound with Yakub. Because Yakub was somebody who, for people who don't know the story, he's known as the big-headed scientist. He's known as being the father of mankind. And when I think of the father of mankind, I'm thinking more of like the Eve iteration of mankind, when there was an Adam and there was an Eve. Because we're talking about genetic engineering, and Adam and Eve are the result of that. Because, we have a Lilith who was the original woman. So in this story, what we could say is that Yakub, mother was kind of a Lilith type figure, okay? And Yakub ended up creating a breeding program that kind of resembled more of an Eve sort of frequency, okay? They needed to change some of the narrative with the feminine for it to suit the breeding program's needs, okay? So, Yakub and Mary. Why do I say that maybe there was a friction with the mother? There's stories around Yakub being separated from his mother, or having some kind of a chip on his shoulder related to somehow being left by his mother in some kind of way. And if you think about the story of somebody who has so much rage and has so much anger and has so much hatred that he literally wanted to create a population to destroy, that sounds like an interesting mother wound that this person was navigating, okay? And he had to, in certain ways, invert the mother to do this, okay? So somebody who was right with his mother, was right with the mother frequency, how could you do that? So there was some kind of a rift. You don't hear a lot about it in the Nation of Islam texts. They'll just kind of stick to the fact that, like, Yakub was from Mecca originally, but they kind of leave out the inner earth thing. But there's more of a frequency too of inner earth, okay? And he ended up going to Mecca after the fact, but he came from not this surface world, all right? So I was thinking about Doro and Mary and this concept of mind of my mind. I had to do a lot of deprogramming around parasitism. I used to think of it as only negative. That was until I started working more with the mushroom realms, okay? There's a lot of medicinal properties with mushrooms. And this isn't the psychedelic ones. I mean, there's medicinal properties with that too. But I'm talking about kind of like your wild mushrooms that you find, when you're going like mushroom foraging. Mushrooms have a very interesting connection to the quote unquote underworld or inner earth. Mushrooms are also very parasitic. So we think about parasites and we automatically think of something that's negative. But mushrooms have extreme healing properties. And what mushrooms are able to do is utilize parasitism in order to clear certain frequencies, okay? And also, mushrooms can identify the root cause of a parasitic frequency. And what mushrooms will do is they'll utilize parasitism to basically mitigate a larger form of parasitism in order to create a certain balance, okay? This was the frequency I kind of identified with Mary in Mind of My Mind, is this kind of parasitic mushroom frequency. Still parasitic, but now doing so in a way that balances out some of the energies. But there's still an element of parasitism, okay? I have been teaching on Black Diamond on Patreon about this concept of the succubus current and how it is a frequency of the cosmic mother. Mary was engaging in the succubus current, okay? Mary, there's a reason why Mary was named that, okay? That she's representing the mother there. She's representing the cosmic mother, the virgin mother, or really the virgin mother is the mother who creates from herself, okay? And was able to absorb her creator because, you know, Dora was her father or grandfather, I guess. It's weird. And then also lover too is like a really weird situation. But she was able to utilize that frequency of the succubus current or parasitism to absorb her oppressor, okay? To nullify an issue that had been going on for thousands upon thousands of years. That is the parable or the tale of Mind of My Mind by Octavia Butler. I highly recommend that book to learn about the mechanics of energy and parasitism. And if you are healing from certain frequencies related to mind control or different sorts of programming, this would be an interesting tale to look at because Octavia Butler was more of a Sybil sort of frequency. So she embedded certain codes in her books. So science fiction is like a threshold sort of genre because it's like it's merging science and fiction. So it's merging the quote real with the quote unreal. So it creates a threshold frequency. So you will find a lot of interesting elemental frequencies when you go to sci-fi. And you can read certain sci-fi and you can really relate to it because a sci-fi writer needs to work the crossroads and work the frequency of Hermes or the messenger, okay? And bring a piece of fictional work that a lot of times is helping with different codes for humanity. All right. And this is a lot of times channeled through the elemental realm. So I see a lot of her books in that frequency. I do really think she was an etheric elemental. Yeah. So shouts out to Octavia Butler and the book Mind of My Mind. And I think she was actually talking about this Yakub dynamic through this frequency of Doro and Mary. So why am I Yakub? Well, if the stories are that Yakub's mother was one of the original women on the planet, and if I'm holding the codes for Tiamat, then I am Yakub. This is the responsibility of the cosmic mother frequency. Now, would I have said this last year? Or maybe even a month ago? Probably not. I had to retrieve certain records of my consciousness and I needed to see a larger picture of things. So I was integrating the frequencies of Yakub yesterday, but I was looking at this frequency of Yakub and the Moors and Inner Earth more from one side. I was still integrating polarity with it, but I need to take this a little further. So I am Yakub. Because if I represent that mother code of the original feminine, okay? But and the original feminine being prior to genetic engineering. That's what it is, okay? So Yakub's mother did not come from genetic engineering. Yakub's mother was Eve, was not Eve, okay? Yakub's mother was more of the frequency of maybe a Lilith or a Tiamat, okay? So then in some respect, those codes live within me. And so there's a very powerful frequency with the mother code. And sometimes what they say, right? With great power comes great responsibility. Okay. So some people might be like, really though, you're Yakub, you're going to take the full rap for how genetic engineering happened. Yeah, that's a great question if you're thinking that in certain ways, okay? So let's break it down. Let's go into it. So yesterday in my talk, I mentioned that when you enter the elemental realms and when you decide to cross into that frequency, that up is down and black is white. So you might be in a particular frequency bandwidth that is more patriarchal. But when you cross into the elemental realms, you might find there's a whole matriarchy there that's running things. This is the Saturnian frequency. So on the simulations game board, Saturn represents Father Time, Chronos. But you know, the more I've moved through the frequencies of Saturn, Saturn is the mother. Saturn is the final authority, and that is through the mother. And I always knew that. I always knew that. I always felt that. But it makes even more sense now, because if Saturn governs the structures of the day-to-day, quote, third dimensional reality, right? And, you know, you get to a certain point where you're able to transcend Saturn's rings and that sort of thing. And if we do live in a polarized sort of setting, where on the game board, there's a patriarchal frequency, if you were to cross over Saturn's rings, it makes sense that there would be a matriarchal frequency. And yeah, Saturn is the crone mother. Saturn is the judge, the authority, and that is through the mother. So the question needs to be asked. Genetic engineering, the creation of the XY chromosome, was that completely a creation of the patriarchy? You would need authorization from the mother to make that occur. Just makes sense. For that to be allowed, for that to happen, for that to manifest. Maybe there was a matriarchal hierarchy that saw a benefit in this. I mean, just because you are of the matriarchy, that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be completely down for all mothers or all humans, right? What if you are of a certain bloodline? And what if that bloodline is very hierarchical? What if that bloodline also somehow benefits from certain breeding situations? This is also where we get a little bit more into the reptilian frequency and all that kind of stuff. There are these beings in the West African pantheon. They're not talked about a lot. They are the Iyami-Age, the Iyamis. They are known as the mothers. They are, you know, specifically found in the West African pantheon, and they're off planet, but they are a cosmic authority. They don't come on the planet often, but when they do, they are a cosmic authority. And if you were to like look up Iyami-Age on YouTube, you're usually going to find more patriarchal figures talking about them. And there's a lot of fear around them. You know, they're known as being the mothers, but they're also known as being the witches, okay? The frequency of black, pure Saturnian frequency. The Iyami-Age, the patriarchy is extremely like fearful of the Iyamis, okay? So they are very, you know, they talk about them in a very kind of way, all right? Which I never really saw. And I knew pretty early on I had that frequency. I had a seer one time tell me just randomly, yeah, like I connected to you because you're with the, and I was like, Yamis, what's that, you know? But I looked into it, and you know, at first I'm like, oh, maybe this is something to connect to. And I was like, actually, no, there's something here that needs to be healed and restored. You know, so I had to do a lot of my own frequencies around retrieving different energies from Iyami-Age, okay, the mothers. I am a very Saturnian person. Mother is a Capricorn, father is a Capricorn. I'm a Capricorn. But it goes a little deeper than that. There's a galactic frequency that you can tap into. You can look at this on your birth chart on astro.com. It is called the Great Attractor. The Great Attractor. And it is like an extreme black hole frequency. the great attractor. It's a huge magnetic black hole. So wherever your great attractor is in your birth chart, it's going to magnify that. And there's also a magnetism related to that, the great attractor, law of attraction. So I noticed pretty early when I did my galactic astrology, and I was really concerned by it, that my great attractor was at the exact degree point conjunct my Saturn. And I'm like, as somebody trying to heal karma and do all that stuff, I'm like, whoa, y'all just put a karma magnet on me. Okay. So I was kind of seeing it more from a human perspective, and also just like being somebody that's been energy harvested through the karmic sort of program, right? I mean, great attractor at your Saturn degree point, like, come on. I can't take all that, y'all. What are you talking about? But I have a different perspective now, okay, after certain things have been integrated, okay? So Yakub was, somebody mentioned this in the live yesterday. Yakub was somebody who played around with magnets. He utilized his genetic engineering program through magnetism. He played a lot with the concepts of attraction and repulsion. And he utilized the frequencies of attraction and repulsion in order to morph the frequential bandwidth of the realm, I guess, known as Earth, to his liking and desires for this particular genetic engineering program. It's very interesting that he was so consumed with magnetism. That's more of a feminine frequency. So this also leads me to Yakub wasn't fully right with his mom. Okay, because now not only is he creating a whole new species of people and, you know, taking his original mother out of the mix. So there's already a rift there. But on top of that, he's using magnetism, which is more of a frequency of the mother. Yakub had a rift with the mother. Yakub had an extreme mother wound. And what he did was he created a lot of destruction through that mother wound. There was some kind of a rift. And a lot of it had to do with Yakub being lonely. He got teased a lot for his big head, and he was on planet Earth and he didn't look like anybody else. And he got pissed about it, and he internalized that into hatred and anger in order to do this mass genetic engineering experiment. Yakub was not right with his mother or the mothers. Okay. So when you navigate certain inner Earth realms, you will understand more of the mother frequency that rules a lot of what happens on planet. We want to just point our fingers at patriarchs all day. But if you really understand the Saturnian frequency of the mother code, things are not as they seem. And you can find this hyper Saturnian frequency around the Middle East, around East Africa. Okay, it's extremely Saturnian. And I mentioned it the other day around like even the burqas and stuff, the all black burqas and stuff. That's a Saturnian cosmic mother womb frequency. All right, so it makes sense too that Mecca also. I mean, Mecca, the Kaaba is it's a form of the womb. Okay, it's a bit of a contained form of the womb, and I believe there's some magnetism involved with the Kaaba. I didn't research that, but I feel like there's some magnets going on with the Kaaba as well. So how interesting then that Yakub ended up living in Mecca. Okay. So he might have gotten consent from an external principality to do this. You know, he might have had to have been granted the authority to even make this happen. But we don't want to talk about that. We just want to focus on Yakub. And, you know, that is one way to go about it. But let's go deeper with it. Okay. So, Yakub, the father of mankind. So if you are somebody who is holding the primordial mother code, and maybe you're attached to or connected to the frequencies of the Iyam Miage, you might really want to think about your connection and your authority as it relates to these issues that bother you in your daily life. There might be a deeper story there. So when you are crossing, so here's the funny thing about navigating the elemental realms. When you are crossing, you can't be caught up in karmic programs. You cannot. So there's different degrees that I've learned about the cross and how karma works and all of that stuff, karmic transference and all that sort of energy. And there's a lot of ways you can approach karma. Typically, most people don't know about it or care about it, okay? But some people can feel like it just feels like a little bit more karmic. Their experiences are more karmic. That just means you have longer records on the planet. That's all it means. So if you're feeling a lot of karmic stuff, if you have a lot of interesting like Saturnian frequencies and stuff like that, it just means that your records go very, 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 very long. That's all it means. But you get to this point where you need to evolve and cross, okay? So what do? You have a big old karmic rap sheet. Also, my nakshatra in Vedic astrology is Mula. I don't know if, you know, for folks who have the Mula nakshatra. That's all about the root, okay? And that's all about holding on to a legacy in your root, okay? So it's like, ooh, all right, there's a story being told. I have Mula Nakshatra, which is connected to that root and holding a legacy of a large amount of people. People with Mula Nakshatra also tend to kind of be more into the healing arts and stuff, and they have an opportunity to spiritually evolve at great rates, but you got a long karmic rap sheet, though, that you got to figure out something to do with, okay? Mula Nakshatra. So if you stay in the third dimensional paradigm with Mula Nakshatra, and then also having Saturn right conjunct your great attractor, it might be a little bit hard for you. It might be really, really hard to navigate your 3D reality because you're not supposed to be there. You're supposed to integrate some very large records and make peace with it. Okay, wrap up your affairs. But if you're not doing that, and if you're just playing on, you know, the NPC program of the simulations game board, it's going to be a hard time for you. So I learned a lot about, you know, from the light elves. I was talking about the different elves that we have, you know, and there's the light elves, the ones who create the simulation, the ones who create through the mirrors and all that sort of stuff. I had to learn about karma through them because at some point I had to go through the mirror. Okay, so I had to learn about how reflection works, how, you know, ownership of karma works, all that kind of stuff. And I knew pretty early on that in order for me to cross, I needed to be blameless. Like a saint, I needed to be blameless. But I'm like, well, dang, how am I going to be blameless? I mean, well, first of all, I got into that frequency and I learned about blamelessness and how that shows up. And there's some interesting things related to it. You know, you have the Nazis with the swastika, and you know how that was like, that wasn't their original creation. But the swastika is definitely a tool to clear karma. How interesting that the Nazis used that swastika thing and created all these like atrocities, but they have the swastika though. Did they have a karmic rap sheet doing that? Maybe not. A lot of them actually ended up in Argentina and different parts of South America. You know, we want to say, oh yeah, this big atrocity happened and everyone was brought to justice. But we all know that's not true. We know that's not true. They may have been able to get out of their situation, that karmic rap sheet that maybe they accrued, and maybe they were able to assume a state of blamelessness through the swastika. Because if you look at the swastika, it's really it's a type of a cross, but it's moving. Swastika. So cross is, you know, you got your regular cross, right? Four corners. You're probably going to be just stuck there. What can you do? You can't move it. You can't do anything. This, though, you can torpedo that. I'm blameless. The swastika is a form of blamelessness. So I learned that from different archonic principalities. They were showing me how all that went down. I was like, whoa, okay, that's how y'all do. Okay, all right. I also, so I learned about that frequency of blamelessness. But then I was encouraged to explore other degrees of blamelessness. And that led me to the saints. Also, the frequency of the kahuna, which we're going to talk about a little bit more as it relates to the Hawaiian frequencies with this. Okay. But I mentioned yesterday, because, this Goddess Keys monologues it's a body of work, It's a body of work. It's telling a larger tale. I showed this symbol yesterday. This is what is known as the Tau cross. The Tau cross, T-A-U. And I mentioned how this represents the merging of the masculine and the feminine, more from like a gender program. And this is known as a very final seal. You have Saint Francis of Assisi, who's known for this Tau cross. I believe there's some others too that I'm blanking out on, but let's focus on Saint Francis of Assisi. Let's also focus on Buddha too, because their stories mirror each other. I wonder what it's saying about crossing. So, Saint Francis of Assisi grew up with a lot of wealth. He was a rich man. But one day he had a spiritual awakening and wanted to take a vow of poverty. He relinquished all of his belongings and he became a servant to the poor. He basically walked around the planet as, you know what, I'm already provided for. I am within a saintly or holy, blameless frequency. Of course I will be provided for. Of course I will be provided for. Buddha had a similar story. Buddha grew up very rich, had all the power, and then one day had a spiritual awakening and relinquished all of his items. All right, he wanted to be a man of the people. Sounds great. Sounds great. Sounds like a code though, actually. Sounds like they're telling you a code about crossing through this. How interesting that they just both happen to be really wealthy and then they decide to go completely opposite and relinquish all of their possessions. Almost like they're merging the opposites. Maybe they're preparing to cross. Maybe they're preparing to cross outside of a certain human frequency. Maybe they are stepping into another realm. And to do that, to step into another realm, sometimes you need to relinquish all belongings and become blameless, like a saint. People do it in different ways. The Nazis did it with the swastika in a particular way. They became blameless with that architecture. Okay, you can't hold karma with this. And the way they tilted it for a reason. They were rerouting karma. They knew they had a whole thing. I'm not even going to get into the politics of that. I'm still learning. But that was an ordained thing. Okay. And the swastika was utilized as a tool for certain beings who played those narratives out to become blameless. Almost like they were prepared to cross. Interesting. Okay. I told you about karma, right? That it's not always about your good deeds. That sometimes you need to balance your good deeds with your bad deeds in order to reach neutrality. I wonder what that has to do with anything, okay? So, blamelessness, the saint, the mother frequency, Mary. Mother Mary, that's a saintly frequency. She's not quite human at that point. Even though she may have been born human, by the time Mother Mary passed away, she wasn't in the human frequency. She was in more of a saintly frequency. When you get into that frequency of saintliness and blamelessness, the same rules do not apply. This is why beings like Saint Francis of Assisi, as well as Buddha, relinquished all of their riches and took a vow of poverty. They were preparing to cross. I mentioned yesterday that the money grids and the way we perceive money, that's not what the wealth frequency is. That's a front. That's a velvet curtain. When you cross into other realms, that's not required. That's not the way things go down. The money system is a very particular frequency for the human population. That's not for everybody. So these saints, as they were preparing to be a saint, they relinquished all of their belongings, took a vow of poverty to be with the people. But what they were really doing was they were preparing to cross. And so they had to pack light in order to do that. And that saintly frequency stands at the crossroads. When you have that saintly frequency, what you're able to do is be in different realms. It's also known as a frequency known as the Golden Christ Child. It's a messenger. There's more access with that. You know, usually in the simulation, there's a binary code system. You have the mother and the father. You have this or that. You have positive or negative, right? But with the Christ frequency, that Christ child frequency, a third option occurs. In the simulation's binary code, that's a miracle. There's only supposed to be either or. And now you just created a third. What a blessing. What a miracle. The saintly frequency. The saintly frequency is what you get into to cross. So yesterday I discussed the frequencies of change alchemy and the mechanics of change alchemy. So if this is an interesting conversation to you, I highly suggest that you look back at the live I did around both channelings related to Tiamat for more of this information around what I mean by change alchemy. But I'll explain it briefly. Change alchemy, with the frequencies of change alchemy, you operate within the Golden Christ Child frequency, that third option, that miracle frequency. But to do that, you first of all need to hold the frequency of the Cosmic Mother. Okay, you need to hold the frequency of authority to do that. Because otherwise, you'll get caught up in the binary code of things. It's this or it's that. But then if you're in that frequency of blamelessness, it's a little different. The same rules don't apply to you. So certain beings, they get to a certain point where they choose to be more of the frequency of a saint because it benefits them in the long run when they are seeing themselves more as an eternal being. But the saintly frequency, y'all, is the succubus current. How interesting. I thought that was like evil and demonic and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's the mother code. It's connecting back to the code of the mother, the authority of the mother, the cosmic womb. This is why Mary in the book Mind of My Mind was named Mary, and she was able to absorb Doro through the succubus current. They didn't call it that in that book. They called it parasitism. She was able to connect with that frequency, the saintly frequency of the mother. Okay, in order to do that. So here I am, right? I've been doing a lot of work with working the liminal spaces. I've been bouncing around back and forth. Sometimes I'll be in the elemental realm. Sometimes I'll be in certain aspects of the simulation. I've just been kind of moving around, all right? As I see fit, taking care of my affairs. And it's caused me to go back into some very old ancient records and search inside myself and to see where there have been, there's still some points of tension that I haven't released. So the way change alchemy works is, right, you have trauma, which are basically different records of times that maybe you fell in consciousness or you lost certain aspects of your consciousness. And they get lodged in little meridian points. Okay, different degree points all around your body. And it's just like it's just a bunch of information, and trauma is just an inverted form of sexual energy. which is creation energy. And change alchemy is this concept of getting to the root cause of the trauma in your body, revisiting the records as a compassionate witness, neutralizing the charge, and then rerouting it through clean energy. Okay, interesting. So this is an interesting opportunity to see trauma as a form of currency that you're converting, to see karma as a form of currency that you're converting. Change alchemy, got that from the elemental realms. Been working through this concept for many years, and I had to go on different journeys related to polarity integration to fully understand this. So let's talk about neutralizing the charge of energy. So here I am creating something that says, I am Yakub. I'm taking accountability for Yakub. I see that in my records that there are frequencies of the original beings on this planet. I'm seeing that there are frequencies of inner earth realms on this planet. And I'm seeing that I have a direct connection with the mother frequency and have my great attractor conjunct my Saturn. So it's magnified. It's a big black cosmic hole of energy pulsating right there. So I have different ways of looking at it. When I'm on the simulations game board, that's a problem. Ooh, okay, I can get caught up in different weird scripts that are out of resonance. But if I'm in the crossroads and I'm entering a state of blamelessness, that energy changes. You can't get to that state of blamelessness without neutralizing the charge, though, and merging the opposites. And what that means is looking at things from different perspectives, from opposing viewpoints, and merging it to alchemize that frequency into clean energy. So I have an opportunity here. You know, I've done a lot. I know how to not hold karma. I know how to do that. I know how to say, that's not mine. That's really easy. I know how to do that. I had to learn that. But then you get to the point where you're like, but there's all this energy on the table. Do I want to just leave this? Do I want to leave a big galactic black hole magnetic frequency at my Saturn? Or do I want to engage in something known as change alchemy? Interesting. Okay. So the succubus current is a cosmic mother frequency. It returns back to the cosmic womb. It returns back to the structures, the hidden structures, which are very feminine and matriarchal. Matriarchy doesn't mean I'm for humanity. It doesn't mean that necessarily. Okay. It just means that, and you know, when people talk about the cosmic mother and stuff, they're talking about a very strong, powerful authority. But that doesn't necessarily mean perfect. That doesn't necessarily mean you worship or anything like that. Okay, and we all have choices that we make. So let's walk through this. Let's walk through change alchemy together. I want to bring in the frequencies of Hawaii, the frequencies of the kahuna. In Hawaii, there are kahunas, which are master healers. They have that saintly frequency, actually. And you can find this in the book about this concept, this Hawaiian healing concept known as Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono. And basically, Ho'oponopono takes full, you enter a frequency, you enter this very large frequency, saintly frequency of being able to take on the quote unquote karma or the quote unquote sins for anybody. And it doesn't deplete you or destroy you because you're blameless. Okay, you're at a neutral point. All right, but at the same time, you see your power, you see your authority, and you know where you come from and where you're sourced from. And so it's not heavy. It's not heavy for you to carry that because you remain within a golden Christ frequency of blamelessness, neutrality. Very, very interesting energetic mechanics that we're talking about. thing. I have known about Ho'oponopono for a really long time. I grew up in a household that had a lot of New Age spiritual stuff. So I had access to all those books, like as a child, you know, the Four Agreements, Ho'oponopono, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, all the Anthony Robbins books, like all that. Okay. From, you know, Course in Miracles, was reading that a long time ago. Okay. And I was attracted to Ho'oponopono. There was something, I read the book, and basically, for folks who don't know about it, this is how it goes. So this psychiatrist in Hawaii, he decided to cure his patients. He had this, he was in charge of this psych ward that had the most, you know, the most traumatized cases that you could think of. He was over that psych ward. And he said, you know what? I'm going to change my whole treatment plan. We're going to do Ho'oponopono. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of their files and I am going to focus my energy on Ho'oponopono, and I am going to heal them that way. And the phrase utilized for that was, I love you, please forgive me, I'm sorry. So this doctor, I don't remember his name, this doctor basically prayed over these files saying, I love you, please forgive me, I'm sorry. And the way the story of the legend goes is that his psych patients were improving dramatically. I mean, it was a miracle. These were the most afflicted, the most traumatized. But he was able to heal them through taking accountability and absorbing any sort of distortions. But here's the thing. I was always interested in Ho'oponopono, but I also, in a weird way, thought the way it was described in that particular book, it felt like a little corny, I guess. And I understand, because this was an abstraction of the actual methods of the kahunas. I mean, this guy, he sold tons of books for this Ho'oponopono, and the idea was to bring it into the masses. But a lot of stuff had to be watered down for the masses to fully understand this, okay? So I always kind of thought it was corny, like, okay, you prayed over the files, I love you, please forgive me, I'm sorry, you opened your heart, and then magic? I was like, is there something else though? Like, is there something else? And there was something else. The kahuna methods, and I haven't read this full book in a long time, so maybe the author did talk about working with the land in a very specific way, maybe. But I don't recall that. I recall him just praying at his desk with his files, you know, and they definitely didn't talk about working with the land in that scenario. So the frequencies I've been tuning into is that Ho'oponopono works when you connect with the planet, when you connect with the records of the planet, when you're working in collaboration with the planet to restore order. So you need the Kundalini planetary frequency of the planet on deck to do that kind of Ho'oponopono work, or alchemy. I don't think they really talked about that so much in the book, but it's an important thing to note, because when you are connecting with yourself as being more of an eternal being, or being somebody who remembers a time of more expanded consciousness, then you start remembering how to connect with the records of the planet and the records of the earth. And if you're somebody who knows that you've been on this planet for a long time, it might be of your best interest to start assuming a frequency of blamelessness and get into more of the saintly frequency. But that is through the succubus current. That is not, saints are not what we thought they were. You know, what you see as saints, that is like a very much of a light aspect. And the light is included in that. But you also need the dark. You're not just all of light and you're a saint. That's not how it works. Okay. And you also need the authorization from that mother frequency as well. That Saturnian frequency. Saturn's going to tell you what the boundaries and all that kind of stuff are. So accepting a frequency of blamelessness. Okay. So how do I say I'm Yakub, right? Because I could just be adding to my whole karmic rap sheet when I say that, right? I am Yakub, and now I'm going to take all the karma of Yakub and all descendants and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm going to take responsibility for all of that. Sounds like kind of self-destructive. But if you are working on neutralizing the charge, okay, you understand your role in something, you understand how your consciousness played a role in something, and you have an opportunity through this to retrieve aspects of your consciousness that fragmented from that experience. So if you are identifying with having certain records as the original woman on the planet, you are Yakub. You're Yakub. And until you fully see that, the loop will keep going. The loop will keep going. You got to go further back into your records. This is how saints are created. This is why saints become saints. They understand this. And they also might have interesting, I don't know if all saints have karmic rap sheets, because in both of the cases with like Buddha, who's not quite a saint, but he's in that frequency, right? Buddha, as well as Saint Francis of Assisi, the fact that they had wealth show, and they weren't, it wasn't just like, oh, they had some money. No. They had like a whole family of wealth. And the way wealth works on the material plane anyways, you need to be initiated into certain frequencies to be a part of a wealthy family. So, and in both cases with Buddha and Saint Francis of Assisi, they came from extreme wealth. So they were already initiated. So the vow of poverty was a preparation for crossing over. Okay, it's like you can't cross over if you have all this money. You're at an imbalance. You need to be at a neutral charge. So this is why people become saints. Okay. So Ho'oponopono. It's a little incomplete. If anybody's read that book, you would want to connect with the records of the planet, like going deep into the records of the planet, the heart of the planet. And a lot of that is found in Hawaii. That's why there's been a lot of interesting dynamics happening in Hawaii. That's also why it's so expensive out there. You know, it's there's a very interesting frequency of Hawaii because there's some very, let's just say, saintly energies out there. Okay. And people tap into it for different reasons. Okay. So the author of Ho'oponopono, I have to admit, I haven't read the book in a while. I'm just going based upon my intuition here. At least in that book, he didn't really magnify the partnership or the handshake that would be required to connect with the land to do Ho'oponopono, those frequencies of a saint. Okay. So Kauai, latitude 22.0964 degrees north, longitude 159.5261 degrees west. Calling in the frequencies of Kauai, known as being a heart center on this particular realm that we're in. I am Yakub. And with that, I understand the role that my consciousness created for the stories related to genetic engineering. I realize how those stories related to genetic engineering created certain veils of illusion while I was in sleep state on this planet. I realized that this origin story of Yakub or any sort of genetic engineering caused a mother wound, caused a rift. It caused a rift in the feminine body. It caused a rift with relationships. I acknowledge that. I see that. And I take full accountability that my consciousness played in that. I also see and acknowledge that there were principalities at play with the genetic engineering program. And maybe this was also overseen by matriarchal forces. And maybe I'm connected with that too. So, or not maybe, I'm connected with that too. So I take full accountability. Okay. And I absorb that frequency. And so with that, for anybody who watches this live, a portal has been opened for you with the support of the frequencies of Kauai, as well as the white rose and the white dragon. That if you so choose, that a deeper level of healing will be initiated for you with retrieving your records. Because with me being Yakub, I am Yakub. That means I am accountable for some of y'all not knowing the full extent of your ancestry, the loss in consciousness. I also have records of being more of the ascended master frequency on the planet. One of these, what they call Syrian grandmasters, who just so happen to have big heads. And they were very advanced, but they also saw themselves as lower than human beings. Or not lower, they saw themselves more advanced than human beings. So they became an overseer on the planet. They weren't trying to, but they disregarded human life because they saw themselves as better. Because more brain capacity, more consciousness all of a sudden meant better, more valuable. I see that in my legacy too, and I need to take full accountability for that. And I neutralize that charge. Also with the support of Saturn and the Great Attractor, calling those frequencies in as well. I merge the opposites. And with this, I create new pathways for an accelerated form of retrieval. Records retrieval, consciousness retrieval, heart retrieval across the planet rapidly. For whoever experiences this and this is something that you connect with, you are supported in that. Through the frequencies of Kauai, through the frequencies of Saturn, through the frequencies of the Great Attractor. I am Yakub. So, with that is me modeling change alchemy. I can talk about it, right? But I want to document my polarity integration process and the process that it takes for me to become blameless, right? But we don't just become blameless to escape karmic wheels so that we can escape our rap sheet, right? No, once we retrieve our consciousness on a collective level, what happens? We see a larger picture. Like they say, with great power comes great responsibility. So yeah, let me see. Yeah. Hi, Life with Lisette. Hi, Andrew. So yeah, that is a part of the monologue. I think I want to share a little bit more about the matriarchy. I think it's weird. Like I've gotten not taken over, but I'm feeling a very white current right now. More of that cosmic father energy. Okay. And I'm kind of liking it. Feels good. And I want to also integrate more of the mother frequency going into the dark, the cosmic womb. I want to do that too. So let's talk about matriarchy. Let's talk about the principality of matriarchy and how it can play out on the planet. You're welcome, Life with Lisette. Yes. Everything is unfolding as it should. Okay. At least in my world, in how I'm, seeing things. So let's talk matriarchy now. Okay, because you've seen me go through a journey of integrating a lot of polarity and trauma related to the XY chromosome and the forced breeding program. And I went in on the Moors, and I went in on the XY chromosome, and I went in on the twin flame program. Then you saw me kind of like understanding the need to merge the opposites in order to cross but that it doesn't mean I need to stay in the same consciousness bandwidth of the twin flame when I reunite. My consciousness can expand and I can see a larger picture after that. So you've seen me move through this process. And you've seen me channel the Cosmic Mother. And there was a lot of womb mysteries with the Cosmic Mother too. There's a lot of womb mysteries with that. So, but we don't ever want to put anything on such a pedestal that we are not seeing things from different angles or potentialities. Okay, so there is a matriarchal energy that rules the planet that doesn't really see a need to come to Earth like that, unless it's, they see it very importantly, then maybe they will, but they're more overseers. Okay, they're kind of like, you don't really get to that frequency. It takes a while to get there, okay, to get that attention. And at the same time, a lot of things go down with matriarchal authorization. Okay, so we're talking about the return of the matriarchy. What we're really talking about is understanding that matriarchy already ran this. There's no return. You just saw a certain part of the polarity. You didn't see the whole polarity. Okay, so there's some interesting things. I want to bring in the frequency of Eve right now. I've been channeling a lot of Lilith, but I haven't been giving Eve her time. And she's been really connecting with my spirit lately, the frequencies of Eve, because what I realized was I wasn't seeing Eve in myself. I was only connecting with the frequencies of Lilith, right? Because I was in my hurt, right? I hadn't integrated the polarity related to Lilith and to Tiamat. So I was still in that frequency of the original woman or the original feminine energy that got harvested and, experienced a quote fall. Okay. So I was in that. So I didn't really have time to think about what Eve was doing. But I take accountability for that. And I want to make a correction. Okay. Now that I've been able to retrieve like certain aspects of my consciousness, I need to, for anybody who wears more of the Eve archetype, and you've encountered me, you have come to me for a very specific frequency. And I'm sure I helped you, but I was also kind of more in my trauma with the fall of the matriarch and stuff like that. And I wasn't really able to fully perceive why you were coming to me. And I can see that now. I had to alchemize some of the Lilith wound and make it not a wound, make it a power. Okay, making an empowerment. Same thing with Tiamat. And I'm like, I really get it, because Eve is a part of that genetic engineering. She's the XX chromosome. I am Eve. So while I'm over here talking Lilith's story and stuff, Eve is also in me as well. But I'm so caught up in going from Lilith to Eve that I'm still stuck on that. So I can't even focus and really tune into the frequencies of Eve and the role that Eve plays on the planet, which is a big one. So there is a change that's happening on the planet right now, and you're going to notice a reintroduction of tantric arts. Maybe it won't be called tantra, but there will be that reintroduction on the planet. All of that has been going on in the background. The tantric temples, all of that sort of stuff, that's all still been going down. And a lot of powerful and influential people, they get different partners, feminine partners, through those frequencies. You think you just you think you just get lucky and marry a leader like that? No. You go through an extreme process of initiation that must be ordained through the mothers. They're the principalities on the planet, very removed, but they're moving the chess pieces sometimes, okay? So you might be wondering, well, why did they let this whole patriarchy thing go down? Time will tell. But what I can say is that maybe the matriarch runs things in a more covert way on this planet through the mothers, through these certain temple practices, okay? So I mentioned in my live on Lilith around the concept of roots and how when you are an XX chromosome, when you're living the experience of the XX chromosome on this planet, you are tied into a different root system. It's just how your DNA is. This is just how it works, okay? Because there's some people who have consciousness of Eve. They don't have the records of Tiamat or Lilith, and that doesn't make them any less, okay? But I was giving the mic way more to Tiamat and way more to Lilith because that was the frequency I was in. And I was kind of, go away, Eve. Go away, reboot. Go away, robot. That's what I was frequentially doing because I hadn't integrated my polarity. But there are many beings on this planet who don't have the records of the original woman. And that doesn't make you less. That doesn't mean you're not, able to retrieve certain aspects of your consciousness. It doesn't mean that at all. So this is the danger sometimes of the mad scientist, the genetic engineer. And I definitely had to tap into those energies, especially last year to do all that technomancy stuff. Oh, I was in my mad scientist mode, genetic engineer, all that, was studying all that real close, okay? So I've been on this Yakub frequency for a minute. Had to do it to retrieve certain aspects of myself. And in the process, though, hey, if you don't have a certain recollection or memory of something, then maybe you're a little lower. I don't know. That was the frequency I was giving off. But now I've integrated Lilith and I've integrated Tiamat, and I remember things. And really, for people who are holding the codes of Lilith and Tiamat, you're like a big sister to the Eve archetype. You've been around, you know more. And a lot of y'all are going to be supporting with creating a new sort of frequency on the planet for the feminine to exist within. You're going to be supporting with teaching Eve that because you already have access to that in your records. You know about the frequencies of the temple priestess. You know about being parthiogenic. You know all that kind of stuff. And there's going to be a change on this planet with how we're in relationship with each other. And a lot of these things which have been kept secret in certain societies or in certain elite circles, they're going to be shared to improve the lives of others, to give people more autonomy. So Eve is also going to be learning more about the art of Tantra. There are Eves, let me just be really clear. Just because you are, quote, capped at consciousness, supposedly, and I don't think that's true. I think if you want to grow as much in consciousness as you want, I think you have that opportunity to do so, But that being said, there are people who have the records already, who can teach you, who can coach you and lead you up to that, okay? And there are Eves that go into inner earth, or let's just say in other realms, and they get very initiated into the arts of Tantra and seduction. Sometimes this is in certain bloodlines. They might be attached to certain patriarchal bloodlines, so they immediately can cross and get those things. They can get those teachings. They can get those learnings. But they're doing so from the the XY chromosome. Okay, so everything's distorted with that. The way they're learning about seduction, the way they're learning about their role and positionality in society, it's a little distorted because they have to go through their gatekeeper to obtain this wisdom. This is why a lot of the sexual energy has been so inverted on this planet, okay? Because it doesn't benefit the consciousness of XY. Okay, this isn't about a person or whatever. This is about a frequency bandwidth. It doesn't really support the consciousness of XY for them to give too many secrets or too many jewels to the Eve archetype, right? So Eve will be trained to be a great wife, to be supportive and loyal and by their side, all that stuff, build the man up and everything. Like Eve will do that and does it really well and can teach us a lot about that, and is actually a harmonizing frequency. Eve wants harmony too, but Eve also wants to learn. Eve bit the apple. She wants knowledge. Okay, so people who are, I think there's a rift right now with Lilith and Eve archetypes where there is like a, because certain Lilith or even Tiamat archetypes have not alchemized this genetic engineering XY chromosome, there's like a rift. It's like, you're a little less, because I've been here longer. You know how it is, right? You know how like the older women, younger women thing, like, she thinks she's cute. It's been like that with the Liliths and the Eves, you know, having nothing to do whatsoever about looks, but it's a frequency, okay? Because also, you know, Lilith is a little bit more autonomous, does her sovereignty thing because she's not willing to get into relationship with the way that it typically is on this planet now. But Eve is cool with it. You know, there are Eves out there who would do great with merging with their twin flame and be really happy and also be able to create more harmony in the world. That's okay. That's okay. So while I was going through my experience of the trauma that I've experienced with twin flames, that's not everyone's story, right? So I wasn't really doing the big sister thing. Like, I didn't have time for all that. It was too heavy. That's too heavy for me. Nope. I gotta go through my stuff. So there were Eve archetypes coming into my reality who wanted a certain activation or a certain key code that I just wasn't in the position to give because I was dealing with my own stuff. Okay. But there is a time on this planet where Eves are going to step more into their autonomy. And it's going to support with this transition with this like weird genetic engineering thing that we're in right now. With the, you know, battle of the sexes, and, you know, there's like, there's an imbalance and stuff like that. But Eve needs to learn the frequencies of Lilith to do that. Eve would need to learn how to be what is known as a root user. A root user. When I first was using the concept of a root user, I was thinking more of it as being like an archonic principality. Because if you look at what a root user means in technomancy, or in computer engineering, it just means somebody who has all access. They have all access to the root system. Lilith can teach you that. Lilith knows the roots. Lilith's right there. Okay, so that initiation can only come from a Lilith archetype. Otherwise, Eve will be objectified. Barbie, you know, time and time again. Oh, what do I dress up as today? What plastic surgery am I getting today? Like, that's a huge distortion, okay? But it's going to be the Lilith frequency that supports with ushering in this healing of this rift. But we need to stop doing this Lilith versus Eve thing, which we've been doing, and I know I've been doing it. So I'm you know, for any Eve archetypes out there, y'all have come to me, and I have not been able. I know I've helped you and stuff like that, but I know now why you were coming to me. And I didn't fully understand it before. Okay. There was even if you came to me for a reason that had nothing to do with this frequency, it was really that. That was really why you were sent to me. But I was in my Lilith, my wounded Lilith, and I wasn't in big sis mode like that. I don't really see Lilith as being the mother to Eve. I see it more as like a big sis, you know, like, hey, look, or maybe even an auntie, maybe. No, more like big sis, something like that. Maybe a cool cousin, I don't know. But somebody who can like say, look, if you do that, then this is going to happen. You need to do X, Y, Z, da, 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 da. Okay? Because if you're going to be in the frequency of like a twin flame dynamic with the way the XX chromosome and the XY chromosome is going down now, you won't have any autonomy as a feminine in a lot of ways, actually. You will need to be a root user. You will need to learn how to work the roots. Okay? That's an initiatory sort of frequency. All right? So that is what Eve is going to be, that frequency is going to be coming to the Liliths and the Tiamats. And it is part of the assignment to show them another way. You're deprogramming the Stepford wife. And we've all been the Stepford wife, though. If we identify as XX chromosome, we've been it. Some people are more angry about it than others because some people remember another time. So this message is for Eve. Okay, this is me embodying Lilith and a little bit more of like okay, I'm a little bit more chill now. Okay, I see things clearly. Let's have a conversation. So women run the planet but they run it in a way we don't assume. You know, in order to marry of a certain caliber, you need to go through an extreme training and initiation for that. And there's an authorization that needs to happen. You need to go through the mothers for a stable, rooted relationship. I mean, a legacy. You need to go through the mothers to do that. Is that, now, am I saying that this is right, or is this the path I'm taking? No. But that's the awesome thing, is that we have autonomy and free will. We can choose our own adventure. So just because I'm not doing something, it doesn't mean I can't support other person with finding their yes, you know what I mean? Or affirm that or give advice, you know? I'll give you the positives and the negatives of it, you know, and you can kind of decide. Some Eves might be like, you know what, I'm gonna get as much consciousness as I can, you know? I want to be parthiogenic too. I want to learn about that. Sure. Other Eves might be like, I actually really, really want to find like my counterpart. I want to build a legacy. Like I want the house and the this and the that. Okay. Yeah, I've always known I've had these codes, but I just was so against it because I'm like, I don't want that. So don't come to me for that, really. Like, let's focus on this. Okay. So, but I was a little bit more in my wound. Okay. So let me revisit this conversation. So your relationship will need to be ordained by the mothers to create a root system, something that lasts, something that stands the test of time. And then you will be initiated into the art of being a root user. So the question needs to be asked, you know, people who receive this sort of initiation play a very important role in society. Very important. Maybe you're even stopping wars. There's another frequency too of like more of the, I guess you would say, exotic frequency of like the high caliber escort for certain very powerful beings on the planet or whatever. You know, even when we're getting into that like spy energy too, you know, deep throat, a lot of that happens through the feminine. It's kind of like you're enrolling in the military. You are under like military service with that. This is the Saturnian frequency. You're rooted. You're in it for the long haul. Now, if you're a root user and you're building roots and constructing roots in this particular way, and you're committed to that, you know, and you have autonomy over that root system, that might be a great look for you. Some people have been rooted too much and they're like, I'm done with the roots. Because I will say there are strings attached or roots attached. Okay, this isn't, you're in service. You are in service with this, okay? So my suggestion to Eves out there that are more interested in this frequency of like having greater influence through the partner, just know that it's a legacy thing that you're committing to, okay? For you to get that sort of wisdom and frequency and know about all of the ins and outs, you would need to commit to that kind of legacy, that root system. I actually, you know, I had to retrieve certain aspects of a lost aspect of self from that actually. And that's now why I'm able to like talk about this. Okay. So I wasn't able to really talk about this because I was still like, you know, I still had to reconnect with that aspect of self. But yeah, you'll be, you know, it's the long term though. So for some people that would work. That sounds great. And then you're a root user. You just want to make sure you're doing it in a non-karmic way. And I think that's where the Lilith in the Tiamat archetype is going to come in and support you with this. Okay. Because I would definitely say, you know, this is the frequency of like sprinkle, that whole thing. Like this is that energy. Eve needs support too. Eve needs autonomy too. But I would just say like, do it for a reason other than money because you're rooted. Okay. So if don't do it for money. That's what I would say. Know why you're doing it because you're in service in a lot of ways. Like you are a legacy carrier. A lot of root users have that Saturnian energy, okay? And a lot of people who have, been like victim to, or not victim, but have experienced like more of a karmic mother program. A lot of times, like you're dealing with that root system. You know that root system, and you're dealing with it. So that was something else I had to perceive and peep. Is like, oh, I've been navigating a lot of these karmic mother things, is because I know that root system. I know how that whole thing goes down, but I wasn't integrating it. So I was just in its shadow. So it was like happening to me, but I wasn't able to like see it like full circle, I guess, or full spiral. So that's my advice to the Eves out there that are committed to being in a partnership, a paired partnership. That's totally cool. That's great. There you have the opportunity to create something new, but you'll need the support of a more of a Lilith archetype. So just look out for those frequencies. Don't look out for the ones that are telling you to do it for the money, because it's a lot deeper than that. You don't want to do this for the money, okay? You could be stuck in a cycle of entrapment for a really long time if money is your only goal. There are some people who are like really radical about this, and they do treat it like a service, like to humanity. Can you imagine what would really happen if men made all the decisions on this planet? I know that it seems bad now, but do you think that sometimes there is feminine interference with certain decisions that are being made through those root users? Something to think about. We want to degrade it, but it's a very potent energy. And the reason why a lot of people degrade it is because they don't know it. They don't know that frequency. And they actually want to know it too. They want to know it too. They know the power, but if you can't be a part of it, then you're going to degrade it. Because, once when you start getting into like the real initiation energies, you're always going to go back to those exotic frequencies. Okay. So that's my advice to Eves out there who want partnership. You'll need to go through, if you don't want to be a Stepford wife, become a root user. All right? Do it like that. Now, I want to give a message for the XY chromosomes out there who are interested in expanding their consciousness. Okay? Try working on like the tantric arts, but like go celibate for a while. Tantra is a long training process that you go through. And it's not as much about like the physical act of sex as you think. It's about breathing. It's about channeling your energy. It's all these things, all these nuances that a lot of XY chromosomes were not taught because you were trained to be breeders. And and that's definitely not something you want to think about who you're pairing with, right? And, if you're on a consciousness retrieval sort of journey, try Tantra. Like, you focus on your sexual energy. It's not about being celibate and cutting yourself off from sexual energy, but start focusing on rerouting that energy that you would put into any sort of ejaculation and reroute it somewhere else. You're going to have to probably go through a very intensive deprogramming process related to sex to retrieve, because because you were trained to be like a breeder in a lot of ways. Like, you have to like reclaim your seed too. Okay, so if that's an experience that you're interested in, work through Tantra. And work on restraint and boundaries and restraint and Tantra. And then find some kind of a creative endeavor that you are devoting. Because I know there are a lot of men out there that they have like sex addiction and stuff, or porn addiction. Like, it was thrown in your face. It's nothing to be ashamed about. Like, this was a part of the program. Okay. But while that was happening, like that, you were just giving away your energy, but what if you reclaim that and channel that in? Because, sometimes there are certain XY chromosomes that will come to me, and they have a lot of sexual energy, and they have these dreams of certain things that they want to do. But what you don't realize is that because you're giving out your sexual energy in that breeder program, you're not able to do the things you really want. Okay, so what's been happening is there's been this like codependent sort of frequency between the XY and the XX chromosome, where the XY got really codependent with the XX and felt like they needed to manifest through the XX. That's a program that you can unlearn, but you'll need to go through a period of boundaries and restraint and tantra. And tantra's not about sex like that, okay? So that would be my suggestion to XY chromosomes who are interested in expanding in consciousness. There also might be an XY chromosome out there that is not, okay? You want sex. That's fine too. That's great. This is what I would say about that. I would focus on getting yourself a root user, somebody who's actually initiated into these sort of frequencies, okay? Because if you water her, she'll water you. That's how it works. So spoil her. No expenses, or whatever. Cook for her, all that stuff. Especially if she's a root user, okay? You want that because you won't be getting caught up in the same sort of energy harvesting dynamics. The only way you would is if you disrespect or dog out your root user, then good luck to you. Don't do it, man. It's not worth it. I promise you. You will mess your life up. Be careful. So if you are, if you're like, I just want a lot of sex, I really don't want to change the gender dynamics on this planet. Okay, spend more money then. Spend more, not even time, really money. Just spend more money. Spend more money, get more gifts, all that stuff. Give her flowers. Don't do the whole, I'm going to just humble her thing, because that's going to cause, if you don't have that root user on your side, she could be your biggest come up or your biggest downfall. Be careful. Okay. Now, the reason why I say, for somebody who's not expanding, who's like not really like wanting to expand in consciousness, but wants to have a lot of sex, you would need to have a lot of money then. That's how that goes. Okay. So if you aren't trying to expand in consciousness and you want to stay with the breeding program, it's not looking good for you guys. I'm so sorry. It's not. You, I guess, make more money. I don't know. Figure it out. Okay. Because, you're, otherwise, like, it might not be a good look for you. Okay. So that's what I would say to XY chromosome. Like XY chromosomes are on a different path. X chromosomes are on a different path. Okay. So I did want to share those things. And just talk a little bit more about how this matriarchy works on the other end of things. They're very much about structure and legacy. Okay. And they, you have to, it's a whole thing you need to do, or initiate into in order to hold that frequency, to hold the frequency of the root system. Okay. But if you're Eve and you got into a relationship that destroyed you in certain ways or hurt you in certain ways, focus on celibacy and tantra, and then focus on initiating yourself into the realm of the root user. Okay, the realm of Lilith and all that stuff, the art of seduction, all that. You would want to go through all of that and plant your seed with the cosmic mother about like work. You would want to work with these energies when you're coming into partnership, because they will orchestrate certain aspects for you. Okay. It's not just, oh, I went on match.com, or I keep saying match.com. I know that's like an old website, whatever. I don't know what these dating apps are. I went on blah, blah, blah dating app and, oh, he's going to buy me dinner. Okay. Like I'm going, oh, he took me shopping. Okay. That's cool. That's one way to do it, but you're in the Wild West with that. Okay. If you want things that last, if you want a whole like foundation going on, you would want to go through the mother for that. Okay. And a part of the twin flame program is that if you're seriously committed to having a cosmic counterpart and expanding your consciousness, you would need to expand your consciousness. It can't be about money because it's deeper than that. So if you were interested in that, then you would you would need to work with the cosmic mother for that. That's a whole thing. That's a whole seeding process that you would need to do. Okay, my particular consciousness, because when I was seeing how things really went down, I was being shown the options, like the routes I could take, you know, and I was really looking at this frequency. I'm like, whoa. Oh, that's another perspective of world leader. Because I asked the question, you know, a lot of this knowledge has been coming out because I asked the question, I want to know the curriculum of world leaders. And then they showed me, they're like, here's the curriculum of world leaders. I'm like, whoa, I wasn't expecting all that. Hold up. Hold up. Okay. You know, but I needed to also see that too, because I'm like, I know that frequency. I'm kind of ready for a different experience. I kind of want to be like out of the root system. And so, you know, with my, with me being Yakub and with me taking accountability for part of this experience related to the genetic engineering programs and stuff like that, then I want to reroute that energy that I'm utilizing to neutralize through change alchemy. And I want to create a new experience that isn't rooted in that way. You know, I've done the root systems, you know, so I retrieve my energy in all aspects of my consciousness from, you know, the root systems of the Kabbalistic tree of life, as well as the tree of death, bringing those frequencies back to me, because I need all of them back here. Okay. And so that's the thing to know. If you're an archetype of Eve and you want to be like a root user, you want to set that foundation and stuff like that, with a certain type of male frequency on this planet, you will be in a root system for a really long time. That might work for you though, you know? And maybe it works for you if you have all the knowledge and wisdom while you're consciously creating that root system. You could create a massive amount of change that way, actually. So this is a serious thing. This isn't just going out and dating and stuff. You want to think of this more as an arranged marriage. Yes, arranged marriage. It is. It's an arranged marriage. But it's not in the way of, the way I've seen it, of all the options with the XXY chromosomes, it makes more sense. You know, it's more fair for you in the long run, but it is a service that you're doing. You know, and service isn't always bad. You know, this is the degrees and the frequencies of domination and submission. You know, in certain ways you are dominant, you're the root user. It has to go through you. But in the other way, you're submissive, right? You know, so it's that give and take. It's that dance. It's that balance. But you got to go through the cosmic mother. You got to go through Saturn for all that. If you want it to be real and like last in like the matter realms, there's a whole seeding and rooting that needs to be done, you know? So yeah, I did want to share that because it's important information, you know? Because otherwise you might be taken off of your authority through other root users. If you're not working the roots, then other root users will show you no mercy, okay? And if you try to get in their tree, good luck, okay? And you're not authorized and all that sort of stuff, it's going to be it's a lot more difficult, okay? This is what causes a lot of relationship problems on the planet, because it needs to go through a certain principality or hierarchy. And a lot of people, if you're just on the tree, like an apple or a leaf or a branch, ooh. If you're rooted though, you have a stronger legacy and you can have a stronger impact. But this isn't something you do for money. So people who are telling you to just do it for the money, I mean, consciousness wise and just looping wise, you know, money doesn't do it for something else. Okay. Just do it for more than money. Okay. And that's another thing I would say for the Eves who are really interested in this sort of path. You do need to not take a vow of poverty. It's really not poverty. That's a trick, you know, but you will need to not be motivated by money. You could be motivated by a frequency of wealth, but not money necessarily. Okay. You want to get a little deeper because money is not wealth. So that's a message from the mothers for the ones who do want to be in a twin flame relationship, which is not a bad thing. You know, things work differently for different people. All right. And we have a world where we can expand and, you know, there can be just different options for us to take for whatever works for you. But you do want to be a root user, okay, with that. Otherwise, it'll be a lot harder of a time. Okay. So let's see what people are saying. Oh, okay. Let's see. All right. Now I'm getting into the comments and the questions. Okay. Andrew says, do we know what they know or know what we know? I still think this is a much better timeline than the jab happy individuals. So it's magical. And that's exactly why everyone is here in this Lazarus asylum. I think many of the archaeologists are digging back down to what expired them the last time, and they're just going after the old energy, trying to recover it. But every time they get to that recovery location, it reactivates the curse that killed them in the last time. Interesting. Okay. Hey, Lulu. Okay, life with Lisette. In my understanding, Lilith was God's wife and mother to the angels, and Eve was Adam's wife and mother to Cain and Abel and Seth. She has identity issues, now roaming, looking to find herself. Yeah. Yeah, and it would be helpful to have like that primordial feminine energy. I think we got to get through this. We got to get through our stuff. You know, if we identify more as like the primordial beings, we'll get through our stuff. But there's an opportunity and a role to play with helping with the consciousness of the more of the Eve archetype. So they don't get Stepford-wived, right? In the, the simulations game board, like there's more options, and then there's more consciousness expansion and just happiness in general. But that's like a more of a big cis kind of energy. They're not going to get it from the XY chromosome, and they're not going to get it from beings who are focused on the money. Now, that being said, there are Lilith archetypes out there that are in this frequency too, and they're of a different caliber. It's a whole frequency that they're in. Okay, so not all, there are Liliths out there that are there. They know exactly how things are going down, and they're choosing to be a root user. And it's an interesting decision as to why. It's very complex, and all is not as it seems. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just they're playing a very specific game. And it's all about just about knowing what's happening, and then you get in where you fit in. Okay. And let's see. But I think a lot of these stories conjunct and are the same and spoken in different oriented groups. Exactly. Of how they interpret the story altogether. Exactly. Because it's code, really. All these stories, the reason why sometimes they're similar is because they're just words in code now, or codes in word now. Lulu said, period. Amal the Nick said, what about a woman who chooses to live without an intimate partner? Is there any way to integrate polarities in her life without intimacy with the other sex? Yes, of course. Of course. Yeah, definitely. You don't, so what I've been saying in a few of the lives recently is a message that's coming really strong for people to learn is sexual energy is not what we think it is. The way we see sex is a part of the breeding program, so, and your question shows how limiting that is, because it's well, if I'm not doing this with an intimate partner, if I don't want to be intimate, because there are certain beings who are in a consciousness of, I don't want to have sex like that. I don't want to be, and I don't even know if it's called intimate, but that's not what I want to do now. Or you might just be, some people, they go celibate for a really long time because they want to, they're building their own energetic reservoir, or for different reasons, but sexual energy is creation. So you would just route that in different ways. And watch my live on, I forgot actually which one, but I guess what I would basically say is you want to make sure you have a very strong relationship with your animus. The animus is known as that masculine side of yourself. So you would want to have a strong relationship with your anima and your animus. And you would want to go into meditation from time to time to see how your anima and your animus are interacting with each other. And that will show you some of the dynamics that you might need to work through. Okay. But you can connect. One thing I said in I forgot one of the lives I did recently, I was talking about twin flames, and doesn't have to be the way they are telling you it is, because it was based upon a breeding program. But you could even develop like a telepathic relationship with your twin flame, and it's really just to, like, you could tap in potentially with this masculine frequency that's embodied, and you can see a mirror of your animus through them, how they're triggering you, or how they're regarding you. And that could also let you know, oh, okay, I probably need to integrate this thing or that thing. That was very helpful, so, but that doesn't mean, like, a lot of people are caught up in the runner chaser, like, I need to meet and merge with my twin flame. That's just the breeding program. So merging with your twin flame can happen in a plethora of different ways if you're not focused on breeding. Okay. So yeah, you could totally do that. And then that's the other thing that's going to be more revealed on this planet around the degrees of sexual energy, is like, sexual energy is creation. We've been thinking that sex is just one thing, but it's actually a creational field. So, sometimes it's very helpful to not have sex in that same particular way, but to channel that energy into something else. And anything you create is a form of sex. This is why a lot of beings, a lot of times more of the Eve frequency, who are in energy harvesting dynamics with their partners, they usually are like, I can't create. I don't feel like, like, it feels like hard, to do it, because you're routing all of that sexual energy, or not even sexual, all of that creativity in that mating breeding ritual that you're doing. And then that's going into certain grid systems. Okay. So yeah, like, there are different options for different people, but you could, cut that out, right? And then you could be fusing that same energy and, like, seeding certain things that you want to experience. Okay. And then just be really committed to, like, while you're embodied here, be really committed to having a strong connection with your anima and your animus. Because also it's interesting, because your masculine has aspects of your feminine. So you get more in resonance with your feminine the more you cross with your twin flame. And what that means is, like, you guys cross, so there's a friction there. It doesn't have to be sex, but they'll show you, oh, I probably need to integrate this, or this is showing up, this past life thing is showing up, or this narrative or this archetype is showing up, and it feels a little weird. I need to integrate it. Or if your animus or your twin is showing you a particular archetype of the masculine that's triggering you, then you would know, okay, I need to integrate that. All right. So either way, these tantric practices are going to support people with having more fulfilled lives in general, whether you decide to partner or not. Like, it's win-win regardless. It's just because you're learning how to route your creativity and to have autonomy over it through this process. And there are different ways of doing that if you choose to be partnered, and then there are different ways to doing that if you choose to not be partnered. All great. It's all about what's in your yes. It's about finding your yes. And this is what we do when we exit from the sexual misery program and this, like, breeding program thing. Okay. So yeah, let's see. Hi, Notabot. Okay. Hello. Can I ask if you can merge with the cosmic father or mother, or would you change the cosmic father into a beast and say, oh, that's a good point. I would do both. I would merge with the beast first. Otherwise, you're going to be triggered doing the cosmic father thing, because there's a really big patriarchal command hive mind. Because if you have a code of Eve, which we all do, that X chromosome, that aspect of you that is Eve is going to, you were saying that how you said that you saw Eve, right? And in your dream state, and how she was running that Adam program, just like in her ear. That's something we all have to overcome in different ways. For some people, it's more prominent than others, depending upon the level of programming or the level of consciousness. But it's all something we will encounter as we cross, frequency thresholds and all that stuff. So I would do the beast stuff first. Do cosmic father stuff, like that's your like grand finale, I guess. Not finale, but that's, you build up to that. So integrate the beast first, you know, integrate your inner feminine, your inner masculine, or your anima, your animus, then work through that beast frequency, deprogram like binary code as well, as much as you can, or like binary either or thinking. And then once you're starting to get like more of a harmonious relationship with your animus, then you know, okay, I can do cosmic father now. Let's do it. Let's do it, because you're gonna interface with Adam, Yahweh, you know, the whole nine. Okay, so you want to be so untriggered already by that stuff, you know, neutral on those sorts of things, so you can experience some of the mysteries of the cosmic father, you know, because that is a part of the alchemy too. You can't like leave the cosmic father out of it, you know. All right, North Star, can you PL make something? I want to go away from toxic family and find my own family forever. What do you mean PL make something? What does that mean? Oh, okay, you did merge with the beast. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not sure what that question is, North Star. I want to answer you. You said, can you PL make something? I want to go away from toxic. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Well, what is family to you? You say you want to find your own family forever. You know, learn. I would love to learn more about like what is family. You know, what is that? What's the frequency of family? Because you know, family has been a part of the root system, y'all. So it's been designed to keep you rooted. So this is why, like, if you're choosing the path of being like a root user, like you're that. I'm stable, I'm staying, I'm growing, you know, I'm growing an empire here, but through the root system, that fourth house energy. You have to go through certain trainings for that, especially if you're not just a part of a bloodline that does that naturally. Because there are bloodlines, right, that just naturally know, okay, my daughter is this age, so now she's going to do this, and then this is going to happen. Like they already, because the root user, which is the matriarch of the family, she already knows how it's gone down. She's been initiated, so she can. But not a lot of people have that. Like if you don't have access to certain knowledge or wisdom or information related to that, or you haven't been initiated, then the door is closed to you. And then your options are, okay, now go on the app. Okay, like, you know, okay, dud, you know, like, or there has been somebody that is assigned to you. That's the way this program works. You know, there is at least one person who's assigned to you. If you try to do it yourself, you're just gonna be like runner chaser, runner chaser, runner chaser, cat and mouse, cat and mouse. But if you anchor in more of the frequencies of some other matrilineal principalities, and you get into you know, you don't just walk up and, I mean, it's a process. But you know, there are people who kind of, you know, they know how that works and stuff like that. I think it's very like closed door, hush hush, you know, but I think it's going to become more open as more Liliths and Tiamats like integrate their energies. You know, y'all are going to like steward that and stuff too. So yeah. Okay. Well, that is, I think I got everything. I talked about Yakub. I talked about Octavia Butler, Mind of My Mind, which is mirroring that story of Yakub. I talked about the mother frequency, which is a succubus type current, womb current. You know, I created the world so I can end, you know, I create, I destroy, like that, you know, it's a vacuum too, you know, zoop. So I talked about that and how that's connected to the frequency of the saint. When you get into that saintly energy, a lot of, and there are beings who have been coded as Mary, but like you didn't know, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you may have been like the karmic vacuum without knowing, right? But so that would be something, you know, when you integrate that saintly frequency though, like that frequency of Mary, that, you know, when you're getting into that energy of blamelessness, you can shut those programs down, and then you start operating your own sort of technologies and stuff like that. You know, the womb is an operational interface. I mean, it's a big form of technology. And you know, especially if you've identified with like that Lilith and all that stuff, like you have known those mysteries, but if you haven't integrated that or remembered, it's like showing up in its shadow form, and then it feels like an attack. You know, the sexual energy feels like an attack, or it feels like it's the Yakub thing. So remember, Yakub dealt with the law of attraction and repulsion. So, you know, we talk a lot about the law of attraction, but what about repulsion? Yakub used both. He used attraction and repulsion in order to create these genetic modifications. So that might be something too, that, you know, if you had a really strong sort of sexual creative frequency, but then it got limited in like some genetic engineering programs, then your attraction may have turned into repulsion to do that. You know, because there are degrees to love. You know how they say there's a thin line between love and hate. So that manipulation of attraction and repulsion, the manipulation of the magnetic field, could have had you calling in certain frequencies that were not in your yes, you know. But the more you can kind of get to the root of these genetic manipulation stories, and then also reclaim your magnetism, learn about your magnetism, and then learn about the creative force that is behind sexuality, then that's going to be awesome. That's going to be awesome. But there was a frequency of repulsion as well, that Yakub was responsible for, you know? All right, let's see. Okay. Okay, Notabot says, I use tourmaline quartz and the fairy cross merged to transmute the in the Fey harmonies. Oh, cool. Oh, yeah, you have a lot of cool crystal ideas. Okay, Amal the Nix said, can you please explain to me what legacy means? You repeat that word a lot. Depends. My legacy plan is different than other people's legacy plans. For me, legacy is me as an eternal being. For others, legacy is a house, what is it? You know, a legacy, like a family tree, a matriarch of a family tree. That's cool. That's a huge legacy. It just depends what your end game is or what your yes is. You know, I've had consciousness that's been in those root systems for a long, long time. I had to retrieve, and, you know, that aspect of my consciousness knows the roots, knows how that thing goes, but got lost in it so much, and now it's finally being recovered. That's not my legacy anymore. That's not it. And then when I was in those root systems, I wasn't doing it in that intentional way where I had access to a certain consciousness where I would be able to co-create that root system in a way that was most supportive for me. Some people don't want to be rooted though. So, you know, a lot of this like this breeding family structure or archonic family structure or whatever, it's been under the assumption that everyone must root and wants to root and has to root. That's not, we're going to unlearn that. And we're going to learn new ways of being in relationship with the land, with the planet, with the way we live. There's going to be a lot of changes. So we need options. Some people want to root. Here's some background information on what all that means. Okay. Some people want to be unrooted. They want to retrieve consciousness, right? You know, they've been stuck in certain systems and cycles, and, you know, they want to maybe they want to be more parthiogenic with it. Okay. So it depends. Legacy, you know, I would put the question on you, like, what's legacy for you? Because I had to ask that for a long time. And I also had to retrieve aspects of my consciousness because I had a lot of issues with roots, but it was because there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to be rooted. I've been doing this for so long. Like, I don't want the roots anymore, you know? And that's the frequency a lot of times of those folks who have those womb codes of like the original, you know, woman and all that stuff, or like, you know, it's a lot to carry. And you're like, I want something different now. You know, I have another understanding, and I want to explore something else. So legacy is what it means for you. And, you know, it's going to change too. Like, my idea of what legacy was very different last year than it is this year. but a lot has changed. I've remembered a lot, and I'm like, oh, okay. And a lot of what I was thinking legacy was caught up in programming. So I had to unlearn those programs. It's like, is that something I want, or do I think I should do that? That's a question you're going to ask yourself a lot of times on this process. Like, what do I want? What works for me? It's not just, oh, binary code. You have to do, you either are partnered or you're lonely and, or whatever. It's like, no, there are other options to explore. And then also partnership's going to look different. Maybe, like it's okay. There's going to be more people who get experimental with what partnerships look like. I know right now we have that frequency of like sister wives and stuff. Oh, let me talk about sister wives, because I was obsessed with that show for a while and I couldn't figure out why. That frequency of that cosmic mother frequency was showing me like that is what is set up for the XX chromosome who chooses not to root. I was like, dang, okay. That makes sense. Because I've been studying that show so much. I'm like, why am I so interested in this show? And I'm like listening to these women, and a lot of times they get into the sister wife situations. And also, for some, it works great. For some, it works great. But a lot of them, they get into these sister wife situations because they've been uprooted and they need to root. And that's their option now. So now they're a sister wife. And they do it, they always say they do it for stability and all that stuff. And, they have a kid maybe sometimes by somebody else. So there's already that fracturing of the roots, right? Because it's like you had a kid with somebody else in a root system and you're not with that person. So your energy now is still being routed to that other tree. So it leaves you in this state of instability and you're like, okay, I'll be a sister wife. And so that's another reason why I'm like wanting to articulate this message to people who are Eves of like, maybe there are other options. You just want to go a little differently than what is shown to you on TV or social media about how relationships are built and how longevity occurs with it, so that's another reason why I think that just came to me of like why I was so obsessed with sister wives, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the option for a lot of women, if especially like as the money system does its thing, right? Because a lot of times people do the sister wife thing too for resources, but that's like it can be a form of labor and stuff like that. So, but everything is going to be a service as it relates to this. You're going into a form of service with this. It's just what works best for you. So if you decide to be a sister wife, that's a form of service that you're entering, if you decide to co-create a new root system and go through more of that, the Saturnian frequencies of the cosmic mother, then you are you're entering a different root system. It just depends, and I will say, if you're working more with the Saturn frequency, like that's the most, if you can master Saturn, then you and you are kind of staying within the current paradigm we have, like that's a solid option. If you're really thinking about foundation rooting, you really want that, then you want to work with Saturn to bring that, to merge with that being. So because I was almost going to do it, I had to get out, and because there was a part of me that was like, oh yeah, I remember how this goes. Okay. And I was like, wait, oh wow, we're doing an arranged marriage. Okay, all right. Oh wow, there's like all these steps, and I'm like, wait, okay. I had to like retrieve my consciousness through the I'm like, oh wait, okay. Hold on, I remember now. No, there are other options. I remember there are other options. Okay, never, but there's a whole process with it, which was cool to see. I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay. It has a very Islamic frequency to it. There's a deeply Islamic frequency related to it. Okay. But not an oppression. It's not an oppressive, at least not how I see it, or it is oppressive for me. In my particular, where I want to, it's not going to work for me. That's what I decided. I saw the options. I'm like, oh, okay. That's not going to work for me. But yeah, just because I've done it, I've already done it, Okay, let's see. Positively Bliss Mystic. I just love your content, various controversial / unknown topics, and I crave and deeply appreciate. Yes, love that. That's my thing, So yeah, mixture of things. For people who are carrying these more like primordial codes, Start studying the frequency of saints. You already have it in you. The way they discussed what a saint is was wrapped up in the cross, and there are more darker feminine energies that you can tap into to get those sort of frequencies where you are becoming very skilled and remembering how to reroute energy. Okay, so that would be really beneficial for people who have like a really long record that they're reconciling, is you want to get into that frequency of the saint, and the saint isn't what you thought it was too. So that's something else to know. You said, I'm waiting for the trigger to contact you about joining Black Diamond. I know I need to be right. Exactly. That's amazing. Exactly. Yeah. And you'll know. That's how it's supposed to work. Okay. Andrew says, and I think that women remember being the other gender before they were forced being turned into a feminine soul in a feminine body for some reason. Yeah, for sure. Or maybe like partheniogenic, like maybe both, like having just like having the ability to self-seed. Maybe there was no gender. That's what I've been getting to, is like, when I was channeling through like Tiamat stuff, is like, this is a very new concept, this gender thing y'all have going on, and yeah, if that's been bothering you, if those sorts of paired partnerships have been bothering you, it's because you're catching the drift of those records, coming to pass. Oh, and you said, and I think in the beginning they couldn't get either one of you to attract to each other at all. Oh, interesting. So they had to put some of the masculine energy in. Oh, you're probably, yeah, I think you're tapping in, Andrew. I think you're tapping in. What is this? Dora? What's going on? What you doing, Dora? What's this? I don't know. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to end it there, y'all. I hope this message finds you well, and thank you for joining me on this Goddess Keys monologue session. I am Yakub. Okay. Until we meet again. Bye.